25 years, I expect. So it's right in my view, out my window. And so I have a big stake in this. My concern also, as I look out my windows and watch the amount of traffic that's on Scott and Albert Street, is the number of parking spots that are being put into this development. It's way too many. The whole point of this, and the reason why it's being looked at for extra height, is because it's right at the juncture of the two trains, the two LRT systems. So putting 1,100 or 1,200 parking spots into this facility is just insane. And I looked again at the transportation study, and the modal split for the shopping center traffic was 75% by car and 25% by other means. So that's really terrible if you're building this for the LRT system. The other numbers were no better. So an addition of 610 vehicle trips during the PM peak hours, and I assume that's going to be mostly Scott and Albert because that's where they got to come out onto, and 689 vehicle trips during the Saturday peak hours. It'll add to an already very congested road, right at a major transit hub. And the road really can't be widened because the pinch point is the bridge that's right at the LRT stations. It's 2 lanes wide when you put some cycling on it. It's not going to be widened. And certainly we're wondering if those parking spots are being built to provide more parking and therefore parking revenue for the future Sens Arena when it's built in the Button Flats, when and if it's built in the Button Flats. So it seems to be the parking is not necessarily for this building only, it's for the future so people can drive to the hockey games rather than take the LRT system. A concern about what will face Hindenburg. So on the south wall and the west wall, there's been no good pictures that I could see. These are better than I can see on the computer, but still no good picture of what we'll see from the west, from the Hindenburg side, and as people cross the bridge. The previous designs were worse. It was 9 or 11 stories of a parking garage. This hopefully would be better, but it's still clear. And it's sort of from a bird's eye view. And we had hoped to see that. We were told back in the St. Anthony's meeting that we would, but we haven't. And as other people have said, it does turn its back on the community. And I just caution you, that's what Holland Cross did. And Holland Cross was warned when it was first developed. And Holland Cross, the retail in there has never been very viable. It's constantly changing over, and that's because it didn't make the connections to the community, and it's not friendly getting there from the back part. It's there to service Tunney's pasture. Others have talked about the height. We agree on that, and the affordability. We've lost so many affordable units. Okay, thank you. This could be a much better development, and it could be a model, and it could integrate better with the community. So please send it back. Please send it back for another change and get them to work harder on this because it can be better.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor Vapor.
Cheryl, what should that west side look like in order to be compatible with our neighborhood in Hindenburg?
As you come over the bridge and as you look from Tom Brown, it needs to have more animation to it. It's just a blank wall, and I don't know, I know you're trying to show me, but yeah, so it doesn't particularly interesting. The top part does, but the bottom part is not. So we need to have more animation in that wall, and certainly the back part, where the parking, where the loading docks are, that's really a disaster and a missed opportunity. Giving a tiny little walkway for people to walk at the farthest edge isn't trying to integrate it with the community on the south side.
I'm just wondering, we're taking a look a lot at the north side of the proposed development, which has the entrances into the stores. What is that pedestrian experience going to be like for residents of Hintonburg who might want to walk to those stores over the bridge, et cetera? Is that something you think a lot of folks are going to want to do, given where we know Albert is going in terms of its configuration, et cetera?
It's still not going to be a friendly frontage for people. It's not going to draw people in. Again, it's just a plain building. You've got to walk quite a ways to actually see much, or to get into the walkway that gets you in there, from what I can see from the pictures anyway.
And Tom Brown, there's a considerable space before you get to Hintonburg, and it's a fairly busy and desolate, ugly piece of road.
It's totally. And it's also a wind tunnel, so you have to brave the elements to get up over the top of the bridge. If you go in through the mup, it's still quite a winding way to get in there, and I don't see that as being a real draw for people.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Councillor McKenney, questions, Ms. Pat?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Cheryl, I just want to pick up on your comments around connectivity and the south side. I mean, this building is as close to Hintonburg really as it is to Dalhousie, to the Somerset Ward, and our communities are becoming more and more integrated. I would say over time. Our kids go to school in Hintonburg, and I know I'm often in Hintonburg. I get kicked out a lot from my colleague, Councillor Leeper. But the CDP actually contemplated a pedestrian bridge that would go over the Trillium line, that would connect the two, the Wellington, the old Wellington alignment on Hintonburg side, to what will now be the pathway, or what is being contemplated as the pathway on this side, but that's again on the south side of the building. And, if you go out today and just take a look down that corridor, it could be pretty exciting if you had good animated space on the south side. Now, I'm not trying to lead you on with my question, but do you still see this as proposed today? Do you still see a bridge over the Trillium line as being a benefit to both of those communities?
Absolutely. We've been asking for that bridge for many, many years, and so that will be a real benefit to go over that bridge, and then being so far away from the building because you're separated by the loading docks and big trucks coming in and backing in. That's not conducive to drawing the community into that building. So you want it community friendly as opposed to tramping through the loading dock area and the garbage area, I would assume.
Because, I mean, certainly from the perspective of our side of the track, the benefit is, not that we don't like going to Hintonburg, we certainly do, and there are other ways of getting there, but we lose most of that benefit for any type of, because as Catherine Boucher pointed out earlier, there's nothing to draw us to that pathway on the south side. There's no business. There's nobody there. Use that pathway. It looks nice in renderings with a lot of people, but a lot of people will actually not be on the south side. So I just wanted to, sort of make the point with your comments that, it is a huge lost opportunity to really connect two communities the way we have with other bridges, and we know that it can be successful in good city building. So thank you for coming out.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Pat. Okay, the next person up is Linda Gamo-Pinto, also from the Hintonburg Community Association, followed by Mindy Seashell. Linda who? Oh, it says Linda Gamo-Pinto. Okay, thank you. So Mindy Seashell, please. welcome. Hey, you're back. Hey. Yeah, you see, I remember last time you were nervous about coming because it was for now. Now you're going to...
Well, this one's not right in my backyard, but it's close enough that we're concerned.
It doesn't matter. Somebody could come from Stittsville. This is a very big city, the largest, I think, of its kind in the city for the purposes of LRT. So I think anybody from the city should be coming out and speaking to it, quite frankly.
Yep, and I think it's also key to think about the precedent that we're setting here today.
The what?
The precedent that we're setting as well.
Yeah. Okay, so you have 5 minutes.
Hi. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Mindy Sechel, and I'm here on behalf of the Centertown Citizens Community Association. So the Centertown Citizens Community Association does not support this development proposed. Basically, this proposal violates major critical city planning documents and policies. Furthermore, there's no plan for the community amenities and services that would be required to support such a huge influx of people into a neighborhood. These skyscrapers have been planned in a vacuum. So I've got 2 quick points. First of all, particularly egregious is the complete disregard for planning documents and policies. So this proposed development does not align to the community design plan, the secondary plan, or the zoning bylaw. This proposal is for literally more than double the height of the zoning, more than double. The CDP from 2013, so really not that long ago, set the height limit to 30 stories for this site, based on it being on the LRT line at a transit junction. Now, it needs to be more than twice that. What was the rationale for the 30-story zoning, and why is that rationale no longer valid? We knew when we set the height to 30 limits, set the limit to 30 stories, that this site was on a transit junction. This height is excessive. It's more than twice of any existing building in Ottawa. In fact, the proposed towers are overwhelmingly tall and out of scale with both the surrounding community and the established growth and built form objectives in the CDP, the secondary plan, and the zoning bylaw. Furthermore, this 65-story building will be unique in Ontario and possibly Canada in its location and immediate surrounding built context. This tower will neither complement nor respect its location. Furthermore, besides ignoring the CDP, secondary plan, and the zoning bylaw, this project is also significantly outside the parameters of practically all the city's planning documents, including parking, affordable housing, and height. This proposal moves away from decisions that were made through extensive community and developer consultation, as many others referred to already today, whether it was to talk about height or where the active faces of the building are, and going forward undermines all the planning processes that the city should be defending. Now, secondly, buildings are not built in a vacuum. Where is the plan for the community? There's some who say we need to further increase density, especially near the LRT, and that's why we need this excessive height. We are not opposed to density, but where are the holistic plans for the community that will be needed around these buildings? How exactly will these towers be integrated in the local community? Where are the schools, the parks, the child care facilities, the community centers? These buildings are being proposed in a vacuum. Where will the families, teenagers, adults, children, seniors, all of those people, where will they live and play? People who live in high-rise apartments don't have backyards. Without community spaces, these buildings will create social dead zones. There is no holistic plan for building the community around these towers. The Centertown Citizens Community Association supports intensification. We support development that respects good planning, developments that benefit our city and that benefit all of us. This development does none of these. We urge you against this development as proposed.
So I you to listen to Mr. James is going to talk about density, because you talked a lot about intensification, that sort of thing, and there's some information that you need to know. This is, even for this developer, it's not a new site, but I mean, Councillor Chiarelli will tell you back when he was the chair of the Ottawa Public Library, which was 2001 to 2004. So in year 2006, and he'll tell you that there was an application to put the new central library on this very site. So you may not have that history, but I think it's important because several of you now have raised the issue of intensification. Mr. James?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I don't see. Hang on a second. I don't see any questions. So, thank you for coming out again.
Sorry, no.
Oh, you're going to have a question? Is anybody else going to have a question? Just you. Okay. So just stay there till Mr. James responds.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, just a little bit of background. I put this slide up here that shows, of course, the downtown, but the Breton Flats area, of course, the star where we are at 900 Albert, but also this pink area. This denotes a mixed-use center. Just the story about height and density, it came up. Some council might remember not that long ago about a proposal that was approved here next to the O train, which was on the Udell Honda site, which is two towers. One was 55 stories, and the other was stories. And of course, if you just go across the road right now, the Claridge is building at the corner there a 45-story tower. Policies or development along this area basically led to the policies that we find in the City Council's latest approved official plan, the OPA 150, about where we want to have height and where we want to have density. And it's in mixed-use centers, and particularly, as mentioned earlier, it's around train stations. It's around the corridor that we have for the O train here, where you get your greatest heights, and also up here. If you look at the policies of OPA 150, which, as I mentioned, within 200 to maximum 400 meters, you want your height. You want your density. You want it to occur there, and you want tall buildings to occur in clusters. You don't want them spread out. So when you get beyond the 400-meter range, you don't get the 30-plus story buildings. On this subject property here, although the heights are taller, and as I mentioned, we're at the intersection of two rail lines, the density of what is going to be constructed is the same as what was approved by Council with respect to the DCR Phoenix proposal. It has not changed, it's just being redistributed in its form. So when people talk about wanting the density, that's already approved. And the height, Council, as I mentioned, although it's not currently in the second, this is what we're doing now. We're amending the secondary plan to follow the direction that Council said is where we want the 30-plus story buildings. So that's why we're discussing height here today, and it's staff's position that it meets that policy direction established by Council, but also to note that the density has not changed from what was approved previously.
Thank you. No, we're not, no. You have a question of staff. You have a question of Ms. Seychelles. You're asking the questions of Ms. Seychelles.
What are, down a bit more into what those community amenities are. And you've heard, or many have heard us talk a lot at this committee about the intensity that is coming from the escarpment all the way through to Churchill Avenue. What does the neighborhood need to be successful, and what do you see is not coming with the intensity that we're getting?
It's a great question. As I was sitting waiting for my turn, I was reading the great article that Joanne Chianello wrote for this on CBC's website, and she talked about how in other areas that are being built, such as Stittsville, there is a current plan for 3 parks and a school and a couple other things I don't remember because I was reading quickly. So that's, at the basics. When you look at building an area, you're going to bring in an additional, 1,200 units is the density. So maybe 1,200 families, maybe 2,400 people. That's a whole lot of new people, a whole bunch of families that need schools to send their kids to. Oh wait, we have 4 boards, so we need 4 different schools as well, probably. That's a joke. If you can send your kid to whatever school you want. But then it's more than that, right? It's things like grocery stores. And someone mentioned how this is an area that there's been a long-promised missing grocery store. There's a bit of a food desert. We've got a library that's going to go up. That's great. These people are very lucky that they'll have a library there. But where's the community centers? Where are the daycare centers? I'm a parent of a 7-year-old child who wasn't able to go back to work when my mat leave ended because I couldn't find childcare. Where are these 1,200 families going to find childcare? What about the seniors that are going to move into the area because they're looking for a maintenance-free downtown lifestyle? That's great, but where's the community center? Where are they going to go and play bridge at lunchtime or for walks and parks? So there's a whole lot of these things. We all know what they are. I don't see any of them in the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
So questions of staff?
Yeah, it's of staff.
Okay, thanks very much.
I just want to go back to the points you were making about the 3 different CDP areas, and in particular the Preston Carling and the 55-story building that was approved there. In the Preston Carling CDP, what was the established height in that CDP?
Madam Chair, it depends. All the height was to be in what is known as the station area.
Yes.
And there were policy direction for different heights. One was 55, 45, 245s. There's also a couple of 25-story towers. Solar tower is about 30, but there it is stated that those heights have to occur within the station area, which was close to the Carling or the old train station.
Okay, so I guess my point, though, is that we did know what was coming through the Preston Carling CDP. It did establish 55 stories. I remember that was my first council meeting, but that was not established with the Bayview Station CDP. It was 30. So there is a difference here in terms of what the expectation was after those CDPs were established.
Madam Chair, if I may, just a lot of the development was going on, and they sort of went hand in hand. So the form that the Carling, Preston Carling secondary plan took was in relation to some development proposals that were already before us. But in relation here, as I mentioned, we have OPA, the direction to establish the OPA 150 about amending secondary plans. Of course, the Planning Act does let us to do that, and it gives us direction about if we're going to amend those plans, where we're going to have the highest buildings, as I mentioned, in close proximity to transit stations. And that's what we're here for today, is to discuss the amendment to the plan in relation to policy direction from Council.
Oh, okay, fair enough, but I think, if you just go back to 2013, and we did know these 2 lines were coming. I think we had paid for them at that point, or were in the process of paying for them. We should have said at the time 65 stories was the height. We didn't say that. The city didn't say that. They said 30. So I think my point is that in the Preston Carling CDP, we said 55, 45, and we didn't have this discussion after because we knew what to expect. And my point is that, we go back to height, and, height can be good or bad, or it can be neither. It is what happens on the ground that is most important, and I'll be coming back to that later. But when we are asking our communities, all of our communities, to come out and establish community design plans and secondary plans, we have to tell them what the expected height is. And if it's 65 stories, which we're saying today it is, nothing much has changed, then we should have said at the time that it was 65 stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Paul Black from FOTAN, and we have Sean Kennedy. Now, you each want 5 minutes, so I'd suggest Paul, you come up first, and then, or vice, whichever one you want. Okay? Well, and then after you finish, then you can just stay there for questions for both of you, okay? So Simon, you're going to have to shift over one so that we have room when you might as well come up, Mr. Kennedy, Sean Kennedy. Yeah. So Paul, when you're ready, you have 5 minutes. While we're getting ready, did Jared Cook ever come out? Jared Cook, oh, you're here? Okay, so you've got quite a wait. All right, thanks. Me? Good, thanks. Hawthorne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Paul Black. I'm a senior planner with FO10 Consultants. I'm here today with Sean Kennedy, principal from GGLO Architects, and together we're going to present for the applicants, Tip Albert. So I'd like to thank staff for their thorough presentation. They've covered off a lot of the policy, environment, and the context questions. So I'll keep my presentation and allow time for questions, and then Mr. Kennedy is going to proceed with an overview of the development. So as has been mentioned here this morning, this project represents over 3 years of design and planning work to date. We've been able to work collaboratively with the local councillor, with the community, with planning staff, and with the UDRP. We've had four meetings with the UDRP to date, including 2 half-day workshops, and we look forward to continuing to work with UDRP as part of this site plan process. Through each of those meetings and through the public meetings that we've had, we've been able to refine the building into what is, excuse me, always contemplated as part of the project was the relocation of city infrastructure, which has taken place presently and was part of the approval in October 2017 of the Brownfield grant for this project. The development itself has always worked within the previously approved gross floor area of 130,000 square meters that was previously obtained by Phoenix Developments. But this project, we feel, has gone well beyond the expectations of the previous proposal in terms of design excellence. Our original proposal was submitted officially in March 2016 and involved 3 55-story buildings with a single large podium extending across the entire site. It included also above-grade parking, as we've heard earlier today. Through working with staff and with the community and the UDRP, we've come to the plan today, which includes a 65, 56, and 27-story tower on a retail podium with connection to the LRT station and an animated street front along Albert Street wrapping onto City Center. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to respond to some of the things we've heard here today with regards to height and Section 37 specifically. The mixed-use center designation, as we've heard from staff and zonings, is intended to accommodate some of the city's densest developments and tallest buildings, given their proximity to LRT stations, employment, and a sustainable mix of uses. The Tip Albert site is at the intersection of Confederation and Trillium lines, which is the only connection point between the city's 2 LRT lines, and we'll soon see thousands of people per day passing through the station. In our opinion, it would be an opportunity lost not to have some of the city's tallest buildings at this location, with a healthy and integrated mix of employment, retail, and residential uses as proposed. The committee should recall that the 129,000 square meters of gross floor area proposed for this site is less than the existing permitted floor area, as mentioned by Mr. James a few months ago. The building area has simply been redistributed into a broader mix of uses, and in our opinion, a more appropriate design with slender towers. The proposed buildings are appropriate from a policy perspective and in keeping with intensification objectives, providing they also achieve the urban design, build form, and transition expectations of the official plan, as we've heard from staff this morning. Mr. Kennedy will provide shortly a brief overview of the project in terms of architectural treatments and improvements to the public realm. The project also recognizes strategic views and contributes to the public benefit in terms of affordable housing, community-serving retail, and active street frontages around the site. The podium and overall massing of the towers, although high, will make a positive contribution to the Ottawa skyline and fit well within the planned function for the transit node at Bayview Station. As per the zoning details and the proposed holding symbol, Tip Albert and the project team will continue to work with staff and the UDRP to enhance the public realm on all sides and the podium and refine the tower architecture. As noted in the staff report, with regards to Section 37, it's proposed that a contribution of $450,000 be made to the bridge crossing across the O-train track previously negotiated by Phoenix, and also that a $525,000 contribution to the Ward 14 Affordable Housing Fund be made. There are also further commitments for pedestrian servicing and access easements and a new pathway along the south property limit to connect the city center to the O-train corridor. We've heard some comments with regards to the parking, and there is 1,059 parking spaces proposed to serve all uses within the development. The intensity of the uses drives the number of parking rates, and the ratios for parking have been calculated using a market study by Tip Albert. The ratios proposed are not out of line with others recently approved in proximity to LRT stations. That's my 5 minutes.
Okay, well, if you're going to keep talking, then you're going to go into his time.
No, it's perfect timing. I will pass it on to Mr. Kennedy.
Passing the torch? Okay. So, but first of all, I want to go to Councillor McKenney because of something that you just said.
Yeah, I just want to make note that it is my intention on the $450,000 that is slated to go to the bridge that I will be bringing a motion to council tomorrow to remove that. It's not near sufficient to, I think a bridge at that location would cost some 15 to 20 million, so it's not near sufficient. And it will go into different funds that will help to provide benefit to the community, the existing communities. One is a community garden fund, and the other $350,000 I plan to use to work and build a park in this area to partially at least animate the space, but provide some of the park amenity that is needed. So I just wanted to make clear that it is my intention to do that tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go over to Mr. Kennedy. And you're the architect?
Madam Chair, yes, I am. My name is Sean Kennedy. I'm an architect with GGLO Architects. Madam Chair,
5 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing me to talk a little bit about the design of 900 Albert briefly, and the process that we've gone through. I'd like to tell you about the architectural approach to 900 Albert. We're keenly aware of the importance of this project to the whole city of Ottawa. And we're very excited by the design we've come up with, because it's a rare chance to design a true live, work, play community, one with connections to its neighborhood and to the whole city. As you can see, the plan is organized by 3 towers of varying heights that step down in a spiral to a landscaped podium that does touch down lightly on the street edge. The site is compact and irregular in shape and organized around a central street that brings you into the site lined with shopping. Major public utilities run along both the west edge and the south edge of the property. As has been noted, services for buildings are a requirement of every building, and we've located access into the building services and loading dock on the lower portion of the slope of the site, allowing us to enclose all of those building services under the building. The project, as you can see here, will serve as an anchor for the future planned development at Le Breton Flats, Claridge. Here you can see one of the proposals for the city center adjacent property with the street down the middle aligning with the plaza at the end of the site plan. And this view, as staff showed before, the towers really end up completing the skyline as all of this development is filled in and built out. As I noted, the development really is a true mixed-use building. Live, work, play, shopping, socializing, with a number of amenities for occupants of the project scattered up and down the project, up and down the towers. A primary reason for this ability to do a mixed-use project here is your investment in transit. With the 2 LRT lines converging here, we have the chance to not only leverage that investment, but we've tried to embrace it as well and to celebrate the experience for workers, shoppers, residents, and neighbors who are accessing the project. So we're not just simply connecting over a bridge to the transit, we're creating a warm and vibrant kind of living room space into the project, notwithstanding the addition of a bridge to connect for those who don't want to come in. That transit connection leads into a common market space, into offices, into shopping, and through an active streetscape. The building facades are, in the public realm, are designed with open and transparent storefronts with a variety of entries that can be located all along these streets, with a great deal of porosity into and out of the streets. The market hall experience is one that's shaped with a number of open views to the public way, and the materials themselves are warm and tactile, inviting people to come up and touch. So as you can see from this diagram, people connecting in through transit are coming into this large mixed market hall space with additional retail spaces lining the streets. And here you can see a number of views of what that market hall shopping space looks like, with food and beverage and potential grocery and other kinds of shopping. That space extends to a park and plaza on the east point. And that space, again, is designed with a lot of transparency and porosity that wraps around to the southern facade, with restaurant spaces and other kinds of uses that can spill out into the facade during great weather, like today. Now, as has been noted,
Well, sorry, but no now about it, because I've kept everybody to their 5 minutes. Who has questions of the applicant? Councillor Nussbaum, Councillor McKenney. Okay, Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just with regard to the parking, I think the first speaker mentioned that the intention of the parking was to satisfy parking requirements within the development. So is it fair to say that there will be no public parking for other users besides those using the development per se? Is that a correct assessment of your work?
That's the intention, yes. The parking ratios have been established based on market demands for the development.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Just want to pick up on the parking question. Over 1,000 parking spots, as you heard today. That's a concern to many, given that this is transit-oriented development. But I note that you are within the minimum, maximum, allowable. But we could potentially have a situation where over 1,000 parking spots are built and one tower is built for 10, 15, 20 years. So how do we ensure, and I guess this will be a question to staff after, but what are you doing to ensure that we won't have a case where we have 1,049 parking spots for 500 units? Or one tower, which would then be an absolute another glut of parking, a sewer, really.
Sure. So I think that's the way that we would manage that is through site plan control and conditions of site plan control that would limit when parking comes online in association with the approval of buildings above. I'm not sure if staff has further thoughts on that, but that would be how I would see it resolved.
But if I look at your plans,
please, Paul? Can I just ask him to repeat it again?
Yeah, sure, Madam Chair. my thought was that parking would be managed and phased through site plan control and through conditions of site plan control if that was something that the councillor and staff were pushing for through the site plan approval process.
But if I look at the design, the parking garage is underneath the entire podium, so you're not going to be building partial parking. Are we led to believe that we will have parking stalls unused? I mean, what can we really do here to ensure that, because we know that we'll see one tower and, you know, many years down the road we might see a second or third. We see what's happening down at the end of Preston at Carling. These tall towers are not being built. So what do we do to ensure that we don't have over 1,000 parking spots for one tower?
I don't know.
One tower plus a podium, I'll be fair.
Okay.
Still one tower.
Madam Chair, I don't know if that's just a question
Like
to staff.
and I don't even know that there's an answer, because, I mean, well, really, I mean, we don't have any parking under the Heritage Building, but we got a lot of parking under here, and it's the large, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying, and I know it's
I don't know what you're saying.
We're asking, you know, the proponent of that is asking for a lot of parking.
Yeah, because I'm not understanding.
But how do we ensure, really, that we're not going to get one tower for 20 years, so we don't have the number of residential units, the number of commercial establishments that are required for the amount of parking you're asking for, but instead we have, you know, half, but over 1,000 parking spots.
Which will exceed the maximum.
Which will well exceed the maximum amount of parking.
Well, no, the two for the built 2,000 is the for just the one though. I'm just for clarification because I mean I think that nobody there actually is going to answer was understanding where she was going. What your fear is that 1,000 cars will be supporting one tower.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For 10, 15, 20 years. Or just a podium. Like, we don't know what the built-out's going to look like and what the timing is going to be. And it is an awful lot of parking on 2 transit lines.
Thank you.
There was no answer.
I think, and this is certainly something we've discussed, Councillor, there's two, we all understand programmatically, yes, they have to build the 6 levels of parking at the onset. And we'd have to investigate more whether that would be a zoning bylaw deficiency if one was to have that much parking in a situation of one tower and one office building or any combination of the two. I think there's also the concern that you may have about those interim uses, and we picked up on those in your comments to staff, which we appreciate, is that you have a range of uses that includes parking lot that would potentially draw in other users from the site and allow them to park in proximity to transit station. And I can appreciate that concern. That is something that you may wish to explore as to give some degree that the parking that's being constructed is for the users of the facility. We're not recommending that through the zoning bylaw details, but we would leave that in your hands if that was something you wish to explore.
Yes, Madam Chair, you could do, Mr. Vice Chair, as Paul Black had mentioned, one way would be through the site plan process because they have to build all the parking at once. They're going down 6 levels, and you can't just build half a parking garage and go back, dig the hole again, so it all has to be done at once. But you could, through the site plan control, put in some conditions, and we have to explore this, maybe about taking some securities or something about, although a parking garage would be a permitted use, that they would not rent them out to, say, commuters was something that we had discussed about, that they would be used specifically for the tenants of the building. And they would have them because in the end, when they go forward, therefore those 3 towers that would eventually be constructed. But probably through the site plan control process, we could look at that because I mentioned theoretically, because parking garage would be a permitted use, they would have the opportunity to rent them out. So there had to be some sort of stipulations put around that to prohibit it.
Okay, so I'm going to make that a direction to staff today that I would like through a holding provision that parking, that we find a way to establish that parking be phased in, that there is no public parking, it is not out, and finding a way for parking not to be used in the interim. I can go down 6 floors, but you don't have to fill it with cars at some point. So I will give that direction. I'll work on that and come back.
Great. I just spoke with the coordinator, if you can provide that in writing, and I've spoken with staff, and we're certainly good with that. Thank you.
I just have another question to the applicant then on amenities. I think that it's something that we have great concerns about in the community. We share a very small recreation center, Plant Recreation Center. It's actually #1 in the whole city for memberships. More people have memberships for Little Plant Pool than annual memberships than any other recreation center in the city. And a lot of people come into Plant, which is great, but it's almost impossible, near impossible, to get your kids in swimming lessons at Plant Pool. So I just wonder, you know, in terms of the amenities, recreation centers, parks, indoor, and I mean, it's not, I'm going to talk about development charges later and how we need to establish development charges and providing amenities, public amenities to the broader community. But in terms of amenities for families in your buildings, and outside, what are you contemplating for young families with strollers, with others with dogs? I would imagine that there'll be more dogs than people in these buildings, which is not a bad thing, but you need amenities for them. What are you going to do for, you know, teenagers living in these buildings? Like, what are the inside and outside amenities that you're contemplating for all the residents that are going to be some 2,000 residents living in these buildings?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. We've put together quite an extensive and detailed range of thinking around those amenities, and if you can permit me to show some of the images here. I think, as was discussed, there are a number of both in the south and the west facades that open directly out onto open space, for contemplating things like a bike club and pet play areas and things like that. Animate that area, but also serve the users. As we go up further on the upper level, this market hall space, which kind of runs through the project, it serves essentially as the lobby, both for residents, but it's an open to the community, open public retail space, and that in itself is an amenity. But if you notice in some of those, there's kind of an open atrium space that goes up to an upper level, which takes you over to the office building with its own amenities, as well as some other private gathering spaces for residents. Now, as we get up to the top of the podium level, you can see here that the rooftops are extensively landscaped with play areas, gathering areas, barbecue areas, swimming pools, a number of amenities for the tenants there, including some dedicated, for instance, right here, an outdoor playground for specifically for play equipment for children. The towers at the podium level are dedicated completely to other kinds of amenity spaces. And then as we move up to the upper levels of the tower, there's also a variety of amenity spaces, gathering rooms, that sort of thing, possibly.
So thank you for that. And by inside, I really meant internal. So what you're talking about, swimming pools, internal amenities. I mean, kids they don't take swimming lessons in private pools.
Sure. This swimming pool here is interior.